started. We have a full program today. I want to thank you all very much for coming out and supporting us. I'm Angela Barnes. I am the Mason County Association of Realtors 2019 president. And first business, please turn off your cell phones, double check. We have some great speakers. We don't want to interrupt them on accident. And then would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Some of you might see that there's an agenda on the table. That's because today is actually one of our membership meetings for our members. So we need to do a little house cleaning before we get started. So I need one of the members of the association to please quickly read the minutes, and we need to approve them. All right, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, so real quickly, I actually wanted to thank, it was Wild and Woodsy that did our food today, and I've got nothing but fantastic reviews. So I'm not sure if they're still here or not, but wanted to make sure that we appreciated them. Once we get started with our program today, we're going to hear from Mike Lewis. He's going to talk about growth trends and the drivers of housing demand growth. We also have James Young. He's going to talk about statewide house movement and house prices. And then we also have Andy Conklin from Windermere Family. He's going to talk about our local statistics. So we're going to get to that in just a moment. I'm going to go a little bit off the agenda real quick because one thing that came up lately is I just want the people that are coming here today to realize that we are realtors. We are not real estate agents, and that's very important for you to know and understand. We abide by the code of ethics. We do all dealings honestly and professionally, and when you come to the time that you need to sell your home, I hope that you make sure that you choose a realtor. So thank you for coming today. One other thing I wanted to talk about is a couple of the things that we do, which kind of go into the program today. Is one of the things that we do is we have a RPAC, which is our political PAC, which is the Realtor Political Action Committee, RPAC. And I'm not going to be afraid to say it is our political PAC. They're there to fight for homeownership, for us, for what we believe in. And in January, we go to Hill Day. And we have 3 great representatives and senators in the 35th District. I'm not sure, is Dan Griffey here? Or Drew McEwen? I see him in the crowd. And Tim Sheldon. They support us tremendously, and they always take time to listen to us, and we're advocating for your home ownership. So I want to thank them. The other big thing we did this year was Mason County Association of Realtors voted in contributing money to the YMCA, and I just want to thank to help our community, and I know there's many of us in the crowd here that have chose to commit money as well on a personal level. I think that's going to be a huge asset. And along with that, I wanted to make sure that all the members knew that they were invited to the Mason County groundbreaking ceremony Tuesday, November 5th at 11 o'clock. So please put that on your calendars if you do not have it. And one other couple other things that we do as association real quick is we do school supplies, which I think was amazing. We raised a bunch of money for school supplies this year. It's right back to the community, right back to the kids, and very proud of that. One other thing that we do as association is something that's called Angels and Cherubs. And I know a lot of you may not understand what that is. I just want to say thank you to our membership for stepping up to the plate. This is a collaboration with the school districts and a lot of the members in this room. We help the children that are very needy. And when I say needy, I'm talking underwear, toothbrushes, and socks. I brought this up because we're just getting ready to start it again. And Lori Brady, this happens to be in my office, and she got an emergency call from the school district yesterday. And I say this because I'm really proud of it. It was an emergency. The child had nothing. I think they came to the school with the clothes on their back. She sent out an email. I was gone. I was just out running around getting ready for today. And within 2-3 hours, that email went out and was answered. So thank you, the members of our association. Okay. Got my soapbox and that's it. It's very proud. So real quick, before we get started, we wanted to actually endorse and show you the candidates that we are endorsing. Oh, so Pete Kohler and James Bode and Dean Jewett, please come on up front.
Okay. After interviewing all of the candidates first of all, let me say James Bode and Dean Jewett are two candidates for the Shelton City Council that have earned Mason County Association of Realtors endorsement. After interviewing all the candidates, the Government Affairs Committee feels that these two candidates best align with our philosophy of expanding home ownership and private property rights. So we'll like to hand you guys your checks. Here you go, James. Okay. Dean? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Hold on, we need to get a picture. If you hold this up, this is for our...
1, 2, 3. Keith, 1. 1, 2, 3.
Can you look this way now? Nice job.
All right, let's get this party started. Okay, so our first speaker today is Mike Lewis. Now, he told me not to read all this bio about how wonderful he is. I have to read a little bit. Michael Lewis is a consultant in the public policy and communications. He has addressed issues in housing, land use growth, and economic development around the state of Washington for over 30 years. And there's a lot more of amazing stuff that he does. But what was interesting was that it says down here, it's Captain Lewis holds a Coast Guard master's license and is always on the outlook for a sweet gig as skipper of a large private yacht. I want y'all to keep that in mind. Please help me welcome Mike.
Well, thank you very much. I love being in this event. I think this is like the third or fourth of these I've done, which is wonderful, except it's got a big problem, and that is I might repeat myself and not know it, and that's always really embarrassing. And I'll tell you a story, and I probably told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again, about this conference I used to put on when I was at the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, and big, giant conference, national speakers. We brought this guy in from the Brookings Institution, and then we had him back about 3 years later, and he delivered exactly the same speech. And I only knew that because of the jokes. He had these great jokes, and I remembered the jokes, so he retold them. And I never want to do that. So if I'm repeating myself, and you say, God, I heard you say that 2 years ago, throw something at me. So I guess you've got to keep things fresh. What I want to talk about is sort of trends in growth in the state and in this area, and some of the things that are causing housing price demand. James will follow me. He'll get a little more into details on on prices and that sort of thing, and hopefully we'll complement each other and reinforce a few key points. First of all, this is a version of a chart that you would have seen. This is. That's not good. There we go.
There you go.
A couple years ago about growth, and so there's 3 lines that kind of converge there, the dotted line and the other 2 of Pierce and Thurston County. That's the state and those 2 counties, and this is a growth index. So it represents, if you had 100 people starting, for every 100 people you had back in 2010, how many people do you have now in each year? And as you can see, those 2 are going almost in lockstep. Now, Grace Harbor is the one on the bottom. It actually shrunk a fair amount and is now pulled out. Mason County is the red line. So, and this is Census Bureau data, which is a little bit different from anything you might see from the state, and I don't know exactly why, but I have my suspicions. So it looks like Mason County dropped down just a little bit, but it's now pulling out, and it's actually, the slope of the line is a little higher than the state. So Mason County growing well. And the thing about growth is it comes from 2 different places. There's growth called natural growth, which is births minus deaths. And then there's migration, people moving in minus people moving out. So 2 basic sources of growth. So in this chart shows the light blue lines are births. Get that? Birth, blue, no baby. The black lines are deaths. Now, you can see they're almost the same size going along there. And that's true. Over that 10-year period, births are slightly ahead of deaths. So the natural growth rate is just a little bit above 0. You go to the north of here, up in Jefferson County, Clallam County, they're way negative. A lot more people dying than being born in those places. And it just comes from being an older community, and there are a lot of retirees, is what you get. But basically, the growth here is coming from migration. Natural growth is pretty much at 0. And there's 2 different colored bars here. So the light green is domestic migration. That's anybody moving in from somewhere else in the United States, 1 county away or from Florida or whatever. The dark green bars up there, that little one, that's foreign migration. Foreign migration is not a giant factor here. It's becoming a very large factor up in King County. It hasn't really been a huge one here. So let's look at the light green bar. That's where the action is. So you see back in 2010, a little bit positive, then it drops negative there in 2012 and 2013. And that's where you get that negative. The red line is the debt. So that's where you get that negative. And then it picks up, and look, by now, by 2017, 2018, domestic migration really picking up. So who those people are is something we spend a lot of time to figure out. You guys probably know more than anybody because you sell houses or rent them places, and you know who that is. But that's picking up, and that's picking up generally around the state. Migration really slowed down during the Great Recession. And historically, migration nationally is below where it's been historically. People just aren't moving around as much as they used to for a lot of reasons. But that's basically the growth picture. So it looks like Mason County flat for a while, and then really starting to pick up. So when I was doing some work up in Island County over the last couple of years, I came up with a notion of sort of this idea as I looked around Island County, which has some real similarities to here, of different drivers of growth that kind of operate independently. And the housing market is kind of one big blob with a lot of pieces in it, but these individual things are kind of working on their own. And as I looked at that and thought about Mason County, they're reasonably applicable, so we'll go through them here. First of all, local workforce. That's people jobs that are in Island County itself, and people who work in those jobs who want to live in Island County, or maybe not, but that's a driver of housing demand, is people who work here. Secondly, commuters, people who live in Mason County. Did I say Island? Mason. People who live in Mason County but work outside. And this is a little bit hard to identify. There's some data sources, but I'll show you a couple, but a little bit hard, but it appears to be a pretty big group of people. Third is retirees, people who move here or have just retired here or moved here to retire, but whose incomes come from somewhere else. They're from Social Security and investment funds and whatever they have, own office buildings in downtown Seattle, whatever. They're retirees. Vacation homes. There's a lot of vacation homes. in Island County, they were telling me all about the sort of Airbnb thing that's taken over the southern part of the island, and to the detriment of people who just want to buy a house. And finally, it's military, which is a huge deal in Island County because of the Navy base up there. And I suspect a bigger deal here because the northern part of the county is not that far from Bremerton. And those of you who work in that part of the county know a whole lot more about it than I do. But military people, they come and go, and they're, you know, they got to live somewhere. And I did notice in some of the migration data, a fair number of people relocating from San Diego County to Mason County, and I think that's probably the explanation. Is that they're in Navy. So I'm going to walk through three of these. The last two, vacation and military, I don't have much data on, and we won't spend a lot of time on. But we'll kind of go through the first three. So employment, this shows employment in Mason County starting in 2007, which was the high point. Now, it's kind of unfair to pick that year, but that was definitely the high point. And going up to 2017. The dark bars at the bottom are people who earn a paycheck. The lighter piece at the top are self-employed, like most of you. About 25% self-employed here, which is a little high. It's about 20% statewide. And there's overlap. If you are both, you know, have a gig and a paycheck, you're going to be in both places. So there's overlap here among people. This is just jobs as measured by the federal government. So employment has picked up, but it's not, I wouldn't say exactly blistering, and it's certainly growing slower than the rate of population growth, it appears. So that's what's going on with employment, and I don't think it's, you know, again, not growing super fast, but I'll talk in a second about why that, you know, how that can change. So we look, that's sort of the first piece. Then we look at a really related second piece, which is commuters. Commuting is a little bit hard to find. There's this great thing the Census Bureau does where they line up by individual person, social security numbers, the address where you filed your tax return, and the address where your employer files your unemployment insurance claim or premiums. And they get a commute that way, right? Brilliant, it's wonderful, except that the data can get really squirrely because employers don't always put down the right address for the worksite. I looked at the data from this for Mason County, and it was all over the place, so I decided not to use it. But then I looked, just to say that may not be that far off, because these are commute times. So I had a hard time playing around with Google Maps, trying to find a commute longer than 30 minutes in Mason County. Maybe there is one. Does anybody know how you can commute longer than 30 minutes within Mason County? So you got half the population, half of the workers, half of the people who commuting longer than 30 minutes. So they're going somewhere outside of Mason County, or they're really slow. Yeah, I doubt there are very many, you know, bicycle commuting gets up all the way up to 2% in Seattle, so I doubt it's a very big factor here. But you know, you have an awful lot of people who appear to be commuting out. That huge group, 60 minutes or more at the end. I mean, I don't know where those people are going, but that again was reflected in this other data that show people going all over the place. So you got a lot of commuters here, which I can understand. This is a very pleasant place to live. But it does get to this next point where this becomes an issue, which is incomes. Now this is a weird chart. First time I've used this. It may not make any sense to you at all. These are, excuse me, breaking out what are called income quintiles. So you take if you lined everybody up by their income, household income, the first 20%, second 20, third, you know, all 20%. And where are the cutoff points in those? So for Mason County, that heavy horizontal bar, the first one, that's the cutoff for people who are making 20, or who are at the 20% location in terms of income. And it's down to about $23,000. You move over to Thurston and Pierce, and you see they're a bit higher. And as you go up, each one of those, the income quintile in those adjacent counties is a bit higher. The medians or incomes are the red lines. So what you've got here is a situation where people are definitely earning more money in Pierce and Thurston counties and than people earn here. But if they're part of that huge bunch of commuters, you know, they come in and bid up housing prices because they can afford to pay more. This is a phenomenon all over the place. It's a huge issue in Island County where I was, because it's even bigger there. People commute to downtown Seattle where they're making tons of money. They come up to Island County and they can buy whatever they want. But people working in the local economy on those lower wages are always struggling with that. And that's an issue. It's all over the state. people from the high income area go to the next area down, and then those people have to go to the next area over there. And it's happening all over. I've talked about this a lot with different groups, but it's certainly a phenomenon, and one that appears, it doesn't appear too drastic. Those differences are not huge compared to, say, you know, the difference between somebody who's working in downtown Seattle and living in, Kittitas County, which some people do, where you really get giant differences. But it's something to be concerned about. The third piece, and I'll talk a little bit more because I got lots of really interesting data on this, is the idea of retirees. And how many retirees there are here is an interesting question, and whether they're moving here, because it's a little hard to find out. And it's also, retirement isn't some kind of clean thing. You say, well, I am, a retiree. A lot of people kind of work, kind of gradually move out of the workforce, or you got a couple, one of them's still working, one isn't working, so, it's a household. So it's a squishy idea, but we can look at it in a few ways. First, and this is a slide you may remember from 2 years ago. I used this slide. The idea here is that you have the star in the middle is downtown Seattle. And then you got this sort of a hole in the donut. If I knew how to do this stuff better, I would color the donut, okay? That donut represents a drive of 1 to 2 hours from Swedish Hospital. When you're retired, you worry a lot about being able to get yourself to Swedish Hospital if something terrible happens to you. So, when you're really old, they move back. But if you're sort of retired, so you're in that donut, and what you see is off in the central Washington, Chelan County, and Kittitas County, a lot of people retiring over there. Friends who retired to Wenatchee just love it. Skagit County, my sister and her husband are talking about retiring to Skagit County before long. People retired to Whatcom, Island, San Juan. Of course, Clallam and Jefferson are the king, as you'll see in a minute, the king of retirement communities. And down to Mason and Thurston, one of my wife's good friends, parents retired to Lacey and stuff, So all these places are attractive retirement communities because they're far enough out to be more affordable and have all the recreation opportunities, no traffic, quiet lifestyle. But something bad happens to you, you can be at the major medical centers and other services, for that matter, in Seattle. So that thing is still out there. There's a bunch of data that I did a number of years ago, and showing how people sort of moving gradually into that donut from King County. So how does this sort of thing manifest itself? Well, we can start by looking at age. This is median age. So starting in 1990, going up to 2017. So the dark bar is the state. So that's pretty representative. Why should I say pretty representative nationally? I mean, most things line up. So as you can see, the dark bars are gradually getting bigger from sort of 33 years old, median age, up to about 37. Mason County is the lighter bar, and you see it's getting taller faster. So you're tending to age here a little bit faster than the state as a whole. You can look at median ages around Western Washington. So these are all the counties in Western Washington, lined up by median age. So Pierce County is the youngest median age. The state and the U.S. will line up exactly as the green bar there. And over there, Mason County's red. So getting fairly old, but not nearly over to where, Jefferson, San Juan. I don't know what Waukegan County, nobody wants, people don't want to live there. Who lives in Waukegan County? Chris Novoselic, the bass player for Nirvana. You know that? That's where he's from. He's on the city council, New York City Council. He's part of this odd political group I've been associated with. Anyway, but you see Mason County's kind of getting up there, not to the extreme, and that kind of reflects that, saying you go back to that zero natural population growth. You're sort of on the cusp of, a place that's really kind of dominated by retirees versus a place that's, much younger. But again, you look at Jefferson County. I mean, the median age there is 58 or something like that. I love going up there. I feel so young. Jefferson County, a place with great ponytails on everybody. So another way to look at it is labor force status. So are people working? you know, again, retirement is a squishy idea these days, but how many people are list themselves as part of the labor force, which means they're either working or want to be working, unemployed but looking for a job. So, again, this is Western Washington. So King County, about 70% of people are there. You're falling all the way down. And so about 50% in Mason County. That's fairly low, which means you have a lot of retirees. I don't know, you know, unemployment's a little higher, but that wouldn't count because they're in the labor force. So you would have discouraged workers in there, which you may have some of, who have stopped looking for work. They would be counted outside of the labor force. But again, another way to look at the demographic in terms of presence of retirees, you just have a lot of people who just say, hey, I'm not working anymore. And then just look at the basic age brackets. So this is dividing, you know, we have under 20, 20 to 35, and so forth. And what you see, the state on the left, Mason County on the right, and it's just pretty clear here. The blocks, the 50 to 65, 35 to 50 are just definitely bigger. All three of those are bigger in Mason County. And then that's the median age, you know, drawn across the middle is 50%. So one other way to look at retirement and people's status is where they get their money. This is a really hard chart to read, and I apologize for that, but I think it's cool anyway. This shows where income comes from. And you got 4 categories. The gray on the bottom, or the light color on the bottom, that's earnings from work. People go to work and they get a paycheck, or they're self-employed, whatever they report on their tax return as earnings from working. The next one, the darker blue one, is investment income. So that's what you would get from, you know, IRAs and you know, you own rental houses, anything like that, investment income. The lighter blue one is the value of the Social Security and the value of Medicare you get. So that's definitely retirement money. And the one at the very top is other transfers. So that's you know, public assistance, food stamp, or it's not called food stamps, SNAP, any of those things are at the top. So what you see is statewide, I can barely read that. I read it here. 22% of income statewide is from investments, and about 8% is from Social Security. And those are definitely bigger in Mason County. 21 and 17% respectively. So again, another indicator of a more retirement-oriented community. Not entirely. Again, it's not. You look over on the end there, in San Juan County. Look at the huge bar there for investment income. Lots of rich people up there in San Juan County. So those are all kind of indicators. And then we say, well, you know, where are people coming from to want to come live here? And that's because, you know, a lot of people would come here there because, you know, job growth is fairly flat, so they're probably not moving here to take a job. They may be moving here to commute or to retire, and we can have a look at where people are coming from. This is based on, this is people coming from out of state, so this doesn't count people coming from anywhere within Washington. Based on driver's license trade-ins, and you can see that, right. The bottom bar, black one, is sort of anywhere else, so you've got the reddish one there is other parts of the West. I guess maybe start from the top. Arizona's the light green one on the top. Now, people moving from sunny Arizona to somewhat less sunny Olympic Peninsula. The blue one is Oregon, and these are people moving into Mason County. So people moving from Oregon up here. The larger one, the dark one there in the middle is California. California has always been the biggest source of migrants into Washington State, about 20-some% over time. Mostly because it's a really big state. It's also got a lot of complementary industries. People move back and forth with software and aerospace and things like that. But California right now is experiencing this sort of exodus of natives. People leaving California in great numbers who've sort of lived there their whole lives. For a whole bunch of different reasons, and they're all sort of political, so I won't get into them, but people are definitely leaving California. Lots of them going to Arizona, but a fair number of them coming to Washington State. The numbers, the net numbers of people move back and forth all the time. I mean, my son and his wife moved to California, so you know, people are moving up and down the West Coast all the time, but the net figures for California right now are quite high, and people are just sort of coming up here in pretty large numbers, and they're coming to Mason County as well as other places. And presumably, most of those people are coming up here with retirement in mind. You sell your large house or your even small house in San Francisco for an obscene amount of money, you come up here and you live a pretty good life. On that subject, 48 out of 50 states have net positive migration to Washington. This was a couple of years ago. I don't know that it would have changed. Only 2 states, more people move from Washington to that state than move from that state to Washington, and that's Idaho, where people move for less expensive housing than from Spokane, I guess, and Arizona, and it's not that, the Arizona one is not that big. More people moving down there for the summer. Other than that, other 48 states all have more people moving to Washington than moving out. And, it's a source of, it's got to be some source of concern, because a lot of people move here from places, where they can, again, have lots of money. A lot of people move here from New York, oddly enough, and from California, places where they're bringing a lot of money with them. And then they settle into places where they can, buy homes. And I had a sort of awful thought, and I tried it out, I think maybe when James heard this, I think when we were up in Port Angeles a few weeks ago. Have we done a really wonderful job of preserving our state and all of its natural wonders so we can sell it to people from other places? And, that's sort of, as a 4th generation Northwesterner, that bugs me. Now I've been fortunate in my life, I can afford to be here. My son and his wife aren't sure they're ever going to move back. We're in Sacramento, which is cheaper than Seattle. Are we doing that? Are we sort of turning ourselves into this magnet for people from all over the world who can come and enjoy these love things that we've spent a lot of our energies and made a lot of sacrifices to preserve? No, what a grim thought. So to sort of sum up a little bit, these are those you have these 4 forces, of those 5 forces, 4 of them are pushing on the local workforce. Commuters who are earning higher income somewhere else, retirees who come in with a lot of equity and a lot of retirement income often, vacation homes, people who are buying homes that might otherwise have been somewhere somebody lived. I don't know that's a huge issue here. Again, that's one I heard a lot of in Island County, where a relatively modest house can be turned into an Airbnb, a profitable Airbnb. And then military. Military people come with they have housing allowances, and they can, they're set to the market. So they come in and they move in, as they're assigned. So they don't have any choice, and if they decide that Mason, a little commute from Bremerton down to Mason County is a nice idea. So all of those are things that are sort of impinging on the ability of people who work in this local economy. And the dilemma is, commuters, retirees, visitors, they all put demand on local services. People don't retire, come here, and then do their shopping in Olympia. No, they go to the stores here, they expect medical services here, they expect all these services in the place they've moved to, and that means they're employing people who work in a lot of those service businesses that don't necessarily pay great. So it's not like you say, we'll just sort of replace the people who are working here with people who are retired or commuting. No, every time you bring in somebody whose money comes in from somewhere else, you're putting demand on local services that will then increase employment in those services, and then those employees have to live somewhere. So you've got to pay attention to that. And this was an issue in a lot of places. And something's fundamentally broken, and I know James has the answer to this, about what we could think of as workforce housing. It's a term I don't like because my neighbor, Mr. Gates, is part of the workforce officially. But people who are not earning a ton of money. We used to get those houses because, for sort of 2 kind of general ways. One's they were just built cheap in the first place, and they're always going to be inexpensive. Or they were houses, maybe it was a nicer house at one point, but the neighborhood sort of deteriorated and kind of moved down. Both of those are kind of broken. It's really hard to build houses that are just inexpensive from day one. Just the cost of getting out of the ground is so high, and the industry has shrunk. If you're when a few builders left, what are you going to? You're going to build cheap stuff when you can build expensive stuff? No, you'd be crazy to do that. So, and then stuff that may have sort of dropped down, fewer neighborhoods are doing that. They're getting gentrified. They're going back up. So those sort of natural sources of inexpensive housing are not doing real well. And again, I'm pretty sure James has the answer. So with that, pardon?
I was looking for it right here.
And with that, I will stop. I don't know if we're going to do questions later. Probably do questions later.
Well, they can ask now.
You got a question? I got a question. I was really concerned when I saw pasta salad being served, because that's going to put you into a coma.
No, the turkey roast.
Yeah. The question? You are. Okay, I'm off the hook.
All right, awesome, thank you. Thank you.
Feel free to get us a few more bites.
Yeah, go ahead and keep on eating. All right, well, it sounds like James Young has all the answers, is what Mike says.
That's scary.
That's great. Okay, so a little bit about James. James Young is the research director of the Runstead Center of Real Estate, as well as the director of the Washington Center for Real Estate Research at the University of Washington. And James has over 25 years of experience analyzing property markets worldwide, both as a consultant and as an academic, with emphasis on market analysis. All right, let's welcome James on up.
Thank you very much. This is going to be interesting. Those of you, first off, it's nice to be here. It's always good to get outside. I always appreciate the opportunity to do that. Grown up in the South and in Arkansas and everything else, I appreciate living in the city more than a lot of others may. First off, I don't know what if I have all the answers, you got to seriously worry about the question that you're asking. That's all I have to say. That's all I can say to that. But I think Mike's covered a lot of the things there that I'm going to talk about in some ways, but I'm going to put a kind of different spin on things because the Washington Center for Real Estate Research, we kind of look at the whole state. We kind of look at the counties and things within the state and look at the trends, as to what's going on with that in mind. So, and those of you who know me know that I'm used to being like a caged animal. I feel like a caged animal. I'm used to walking around the room and everything. So I'll try and stay still as much as I can for the camera guys in the back. Thanks. So what I'm going to talk about is the current kind of demographic situation. I'll get into that a little bit, but not too bad. I'm just going to take a global look at it. The Washington Center for Real Estate Research has been doing a housing affordability index for about 30 years now. And we're going to look at some of the affordability data, some of the county statistics on affordable housing, and a lot of other issues there. And then we're going to kind of dive into what the supply dynamics are. And there's a lot of things happening in housing supply and those supply dynamics that are driving prices in some ways. Demand always drives prices, but the lack of supply or the oversupply tells you how much prices are going to move. It's that relationship that really matters. And then we're going to talk about affordable housing issues, risk return, economics, all the rest of these things that can be political third rail, if you like. So that's kind of scary. I'll try not to kill myself on that third rail. So let's get started. Looking at population, Mike's covered kind of from a level here. Looking forward, I've kind of put a "we are here," kind of this green line here. Now, this is important in terms of what's going on in the state of Washington. This is from the Office of Financial Management. But if you look, the primary first-time buyer age group is not declining, right? It's not declining. It's going to go up about 11% from today's level in the next 20 years, okay? So it's expected to go up by about 11%, which isn't too bad. And the state total population is expected to go up. Is expected to go up. Is expected to go up by 22%. Okay, so that's not too bad. So it's going up quite a bit, but it's going up by 22%. The key thing is the retirement population in the whole state, right, is going up by 63%. That's from today's level. In the next 20 years, it's estimated to go up by 63%. That's a lot of folks. That's a lot of people. A lot of people aging in place, which means they're not going to be selling their home, or if they do sell their home, they're going to be looking for another home. It's probably not as big as the one they're living in. So this demographic has a huge issue in terms of where demand is structured, what types of housing people are going to be looking for. Okay, that's a big issue. And not only the types of housing that they're going to be looking for, but how much they're willing to pay and how they're going to pay for it. Okay? Which is where we get lots of fun here. So, the other thing, we have demand, but we also have finance, right? And this is roughly the changes in mortgage payments that you have as a result of just interest rates, okay? So right now, mortgage interest rates, the quarterly average for the third quarter this year was about 3.66% on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, right? The average was 3.66%. That's pretty low, right? The previous low that we had was in November 2017, okay? And that was 3.9, okay? Now, I've put in the high there because if you recall, this time last year, interest rates were up quite a bit. It was somewhere around 4.5%, okay? And that's a big sort of change. Now, just the change that we get from 3.9% 2 years ago, when I first spoke at this event 2 years ago, lots has changed, so I'm going to say it's me. But the interest rates have fallen down even further. And that 24 basis point change in interest rates means that people can bid up house prices by about 3.5% to 4%. Okay? That change in the payment, that's not even working. Forget it. Right? That change in the payment matters. Okay? That change in the payment matters to the extent that you can bid up house prices. So that's $63 or $67 if you're borrowing $100,000, means you could bid the price up even more to keep the same repayment as you had 2 years ago. Let's put this another way, right? Between that if you could afford that 5.25 when interest rates were over 4.5%, if you could afford that, right, your spending power now with the extra $67 in the difference, that spending power equals about an 8 to a 10% rise in house prices. And you would keep the same payment that you would have had a year ago. That's a lot. That's a lot of spending power that's coming into the market. So even if you don't have demand, you've got a lot of spending power. So if somebody says, I want that house, they could go get it. Right? Lending criteria are pretty easy and everything else. So we'll talk about this maybe a little bit more as we go, but something that, what am I doing here? I just made some big mistake. We'll try that. Oop. Oh, okay. Cool. Right? So just look at overall statewide house prices, okay? Overall statewide house prices, we hit the 400,000 mark, right? This quarter, preliminary statistic, this is a preliminary third quarter statistic. It's not incorporated in the graph because we're working on those statistics right now. The median statewide house price is going to be over 400,000. That's quite high, I think, but it's, as you can see, it's historically sort of high, because if you look at the peak of the last market in 2006, 2007, right, that peak, we've just blown that away in terms of the state. Now, it hasn't been even. We all know that the growth in house prices hasn't been even at all. It changes, every county's different, every place is different. So, kind of breaking it down here, I wanted to point out two things to this chart. This is the 4 counties around here, kind of, that we're looking at, right? The big 4 counties here. Big, huge price difference between Grays Harbor County and Kitsap County. Obviously, the big, huge difference there. Mason County is kind of nicely placed in the middle there. But one thing to note is when you came out of when you hit the prices from the last cycle, okay? This is what the kind of economist geeks like to look at, is these differences and what the lags are between when you hit the peak last time or when somebody else has hit a peak and when someplace else hits the peak, right? And it's interesting that the peak there for Kitsap County was in June 2016. That's when they hit the price from the peak of 2007, 2008, and didn't come down from it, okay? Interestingly, Mason County was about the same time I spoke here last time, 2 years ago. So it hasn't gone back down since in terms of the median house price. And that's an interesting sort of lag. That you may think, okay, it's a little over a year. But that year matters in terms of it's first the donut concept that Mike talked about, but when you look at how prices spread out and how they change differentially, that is really meaningful in terms of what happens in those counties eventually comes here. And it will eventually come here, and how it comes here and what it does to prices can be really kind of interesting. Okay? This also indicates that people are moving into the area or they're trying to find housing in the area to escape higher priced areas. We're kind of in the middle here, right? But you're commuting distance from places, okay? So given that you're commuting distance from places, it makes sense that you would have that lag as prices go up somewhere else or hit their peaks, people are going to move further out. That makes a lot of sense intuitively, okay? So this is where I talk about something, if you've seen me speak before, which I don't know who may have, I kind of feel sorry for you. No. But if you've heard me speak before, the housing ladder is an important economic concept, okay? It's an important economic concept that most people kind of rent for a while, and then they go off and buy their first home, and then they trade up. But, you guys see this all the time. That's the sort of ideal. It's the sort of, American dream sort of thing that you build up, you get the equity, and then when you have that equity, you get the financial equity in the house, and then when you retire, you're able to trade down and pay cash for wherever you're going to retire. Or you have the option of aging where you are, staying where you are, right, and having the family around you. Okay, that's the kind of idea, right? So this idea of the housing ladder is kind of real in economics. It's very real in an economic sense. You guys see it every day. And you have ladders within each category. So I've got rental housing down here. The rental housing, first-time home buyers, sort of above that, you get price-insensitive, your San Juan Island sort of stuff and that sort of thing. Okay? So when you've got that sort of ladder, what matters in this is that people are able to move between those rungs of the ladder easily. Right? How easy is it to move between those tenures? How easy is it for someone to rent and then save up enough money to buy a house and to buy their first house? How easy is it for someone to take that first house, sell it, and then trade up, and then trade back down? So the rungs of the ladder would represent how easy that is. Okay? So we call it sort of concept filtering, where you can. Doesn't matter what type of housing you build, as long as you build houses, right? I'm going to be trading up for a first-time buyer house. So when I trade up, then I'm going to be able to free up my house for a first-time buyer. And then I'm creating space further down the line because that first-time buyer can afford that house. I've traded up. Everything's good, okay? And then when I want to trade back down, that person who bought that house years ago will be wanting to trade up. And so the idea that you filter everything through, okay? So you have a continuum of tenure up or down, and then you have filtering within it, okay? So that's a very important concept at this point. Now, this is the Housing Affordability Index, and I've kind of put this in here to show this is housing affordability for the 4 counties. Can everybody hear me? Good? Okay. Oh, you need a mic. I need a mic. Okay. That's excellent. All right, cool. Thank you.
Out of back.
All right, thanks. Awesome. Thank you. Right. So if you look at the composite index here for housing affordability, okay, the state housing affordability is right at sort of 100. Now, housing affordability we define as median income, right? Median house price, 30-year fixed rate mortgage, prevailing rates, 20% down payment, okay? That's sort of normal, so 25% of the income going toward mortgage repayments. Now, banks will go higher than that in terms of the total payment and the total cost of ownership. We know that, but we don't know, that'll change within counties based on property taxes and everything else. So to keep everything level, we take 25%. Okay? And notice that, overall, Mason County, the green line there, pretty affordable. It's pretty affordable. The state is right at 100. It's below 100. It reached below 100 last quarter. My preliminary statistics are showing it may stay there, but it's been hovering around that 100 level for affordability for about the past 3 quarters. But we're well above the red line there at 100, which shows housing affordability, and most of the counties around here are. Now, that may be surprising to some of you, like, wow, it's affordable and everything else, but here's part of the issue, right? Let's go to the peak that we talked about earlier. What really matters here is not necessarily whether it's affordable now. What kind of matters is the slope in that line, right? So from the peak, when we hit the peak from the last cycle, 2017, third quarter, right? Affordability has gone down fairly consistently. And then when interest rates went back up, you could see where it didn't improve, right? Where it kind of changed a bit. Demand actually went really down. Then now we're crashing back down again, right? So the affordability is becoming an acute problem. You're getting closer to 100, and you're getting closer to 100 quickly. Now this is the 100 meaning you're in balance. If it's over 100, that's a good thing. Under 100 is a bad thing. That means it's not affordable, okay? So we're all above 100 still, it's all good, but that change is happening really, really quickly, right? I figure it's about a 21% change in affordability. 21% change in affordability in 2 years, okay? So let's look at it in terms of first-time buyers. Everybody's below 100 for first-time buyers. Now, that means it's, unaffordable. You take different assumptions for first-time buyers. We're assuming lower income, right? So 70% median income. We're also assuming a lower down payment, that they only have to pay 10% down. We only assume 10% down. And they have to pay PMI. They have to do all the rest of these things. So when we look at first-time buyers, and we recalculate the index, everything is below 100. Most of the state is below 100. Most of the state is below 100. There are a few counties that are above, okay? Now, going back to when I came here 2 years ago, something that's interesting to note is that in Mason County, the affordability is 109.9. That meant that a first-time buyer could pay about 90% of the median house price and still afford it. Right? Still afford it, even with the lower incomes and everything else. They could still afford it 2 years ago. Now we're at 89.9, which means we're unaffordable. That it's about 11% over what they could afford right now. That's 2-year change. That's a 2-year change. You've had that massive difference in what people can afford. And this is at the same time interest rates are at record lows. So you have record low interest rates, and you have bigger affordability problems than you had before. Okay? Which kind of says you have both demand coming in and a huge supply problem, and that you can't get the supply out there. So being an economist, being kind of geeky about this stuff, and being thoroughly boring about it, I played a few algebra games, okay? And they don't call this the dismal science for nothing. And so the next statistics are going to be rather dismal. Okay, I'm just going to warn you about this. Okay, housing affordability index. This for the second quarter of this year is 126. Right. So the price to get to 100, which is affordable, right? That's the line at which something is affordable or unaffordable. Remember, over 100 is good. Under 100 is bad. So overall, that means 26. You could bid up the price of a house 26% over the median and still be affordable for the median household income at traditional mortgage lending criteria under current conditions. Okay? That doesn't sound too bad, right? And that's okay. We're one of the more affordable counties in the state here in Mason County, right? But the next slide for first-time buyers, check that out. Oh, I forgot my little algebra trick here. Let's just kind of move it. Because that was over 100, notice the price to get it to 100 is lower than the median price, right? Or sorry, it's higher. People can afford to pay more. People can afford to pay more, so get it to 100, jack that number out. Let's look at first-time buyers, right? since we know we're pretty low there, right? We're at 89.5 in the second quarter. So that means that the median, the person that's first-time buyer, right, looking at a lower priced house with a lower down payment to make, right, to get that figure to 100, they can only afford $206,700. So if you want to make a house affordable for a first-time buyer, anything below that is affordable. Anything below that is affordable. So I kind of took a page out of Andy's book here, sorry, I kind of took a page out of your book here and said, all right, how many properties were on the market this year so far that have closed, courtesy of Northwest MLS, that fit that first-time buyer criteria? That's not a lot. 27%, that's pretty high. But I was looking at it there and I was thinking, what properties are you getting? What properties are you getting for that? And we're not taking away. You're getting a beat-up place in the middle of nowhere, right? You're getting a place that it's not habitable in a lot of times, right? This isn't as bad as King County. King County is about 7%, and there's some other counties, like Chelan County is like 3 or 4% of the listings, right? The reason I bring this up is because this is a story that's coming to you, right? Because in a lot of the other counties, you can't even get the beat-up place anymore, right? So with the growth you have in terms of the demographics, employment, everything else, the house price movements happening in the counties surrounding here, and the fact that Mason County is close enough to commute and it's affordable, watch out. In terms of predicting the future, all I can say is watch out. And you're probably seeing a fair bit of it in Belfair and a few of the other areas closer to the employment centers. And I was talking to someone the other day who works in state government, and they were saying that they said, well, they took the job. They said, well, we knew we couldn't afford to live in Olympia. So we're going to come here to Shelton and commute. And now they're finding they can't afford to live in Shelton because, one, they can't find a place to rent. If they do find a place to rent, it's expensive. Right? The vacancy rate in Thurston County right now is about 2.5%. 5 is considered a tight market. 3 is considered really tight. They're 2.5%. So they can't find a place that they can afford to rent in Thurston because they moved here and they can't find a place here either. Even commute, right? So it's becoming a problem. It's going to be a problem, I think, for the future. But when we think about the housing ladder, what houses are people able to buy? Can they get on the ladder? Can they move between the rungs of the ladder? And I think what you've got, the reason you're seeing the movement here in Mason County is every other place in the state has this missing middle. You can't, first-time buyer houses, like I said, in King County are about 4%, 5%. Right? You look at Thurston County, you're still less than 10% that are available for first-time buyers that are affordable. You move here, there's a lot more houses. But you've got that missing middle, and that missing middle means those people are going to be coming here looking for houses. They are already here. They're already coming. Now, what makes this worse is that there's not a lot of new construction going on in the places where those employment centers are. There's not any construction in terms of first-time buyer housing to be able to buy. Everything that's going up is multifamily rental. Everything that's going up is multifamily rental. There have been no condominiums built in Thurston County in ages. Absolute ages. Any of the surrounding counties have had almost no condominiums built in this cycle. Very, very few. If you look at King County even, less than 10% of all the multifamily starts over the past 10 years have been condominiums or high-density housing that is affordable to first-time buyers. Well, I'm not even saying affordable to first-time buyers. Just multifamily that you can own. Okay? Much less affordable. Most of it's priced in the, above $500,000. So when you have that sort of demographic, if I'm a first-time buyer and I say, right, I'm going to move someplace, I want to own a house. Where am I going to go? Well, I'm starting to come here. People are starting to come here for that. And people do come here for that. Okay, what's next? Now it's more unaffordable. People who didn't move are saying, well, I can't live there either. What am I going to do? Well, I'm just going to have to rent. How do you get from that part of the ladder, from rental, to get your first home? And that's the key question. And as realtors, that's a big question. That's a really big question, because your job is kind of helping people move through this process, okay? And it's something you guys care about. But the key thing to remember is vacuum. A vacuum is going to be filled. Where you have that rung in the ladder where it's too high, that creates a vacuum. And the expression is, I'm going to change it out to water doesn't run uphill. Water doesn't run uphill. So what happens is the rental market is going to move up to meet that demand. There's no condominium development. The deals pencil out. So keep building more multifamily housing. So places like Olympia, places all over King, Pierce, Thurston County, you're getting multifamily housing everywhere. But over time, I'm thinking, do I want to live in an apartment? Do I want to live in a rental property for 20, 30 years? No, I aspire to something more than that. So, but what happens is, if that's the only thing being built, the first-time buyer houses are being built, I'm stuck there. I'm going to keep paying higher and higher rent, right? That first-time buyer house that's not being built, filtering doesn't work. None of the concepts up and down the ladder work there. Nothing works. Everything gets gummed up. So the question is, since it doesn't flow uphill, is what can be done policy-wise? What can be accomplished in terms of legislative things? What's stopping this housing from being built? So you've got this gap. The rental market's going to fill it. Everything's going to go downhill. We have to remember homelessness, all the rest of this sort of stuff, that's the bottom part of the rental market. If I gentrify a rental property to get higher rents, where are those people that live there going to go? They're going to be chucked out on the street. They have nowhere to go and increasingly fewer options. So home ownership matters for every part of the ladder because it doesn't flow uphill. Okay? So what policy-wise can we do to help solve all these housing problems? And that comes out to condominium liability, things that were done in the last session, legislative session, that were really important in terms of making those changes, but they don't happen overnight. It's kind of a mixed bag. You can change one thing and that may make a positive difference, but it takes time for that difference to be seen. So whatever policy comes out, anything that affects housing and how housing gets developed needs to be thought about in balance. Remembering the ladder that you've got that vacuum, that vacuum can't exist. It's going to get filled up by what's below it. So it's a matter of encouraging that vacuum to be filled by something else, and how does that happen? Okay? Now there's three things to kind of remember here. Is first off, you've got expectations, right? And I'm just going to go to what's driving supply in the markets, because I'm a supply side guy. I do a lot of research in housing supply, okay? So what are the expectations? So let's look at cap rates, right? Cap rates are sort of a yield for multifamily properties, for rental properties, that show the relative risk of property, okay? Show the relative risk of it. I'm going to other places. There's not enough comps here in Mason County to really go with, but you guys are being influenced by the same factors here. And it's coming to the market here. Right? Seattle cap rates are about 3.5% on prime property. Remember, the cost of money is about that. The cost of their money is about that. So they're basically saying that rental property is a one-way bet. Prime rental property is a one-way bet. There's going to be demand. We're not worried about it. There's going to be a shortage. Okay? So that's a one-way bet. The problem is, if you think about a cap rate measuring risk, so a low cap rate means it's low risk. Right? High cap rate means it's a high risk property. Right? It's going to need some money in it and all the rest of this sort of thing. So you look at the high and the low. And I use Spokane as an example here because it's where this really has hit home. Right? Where it's really hit home is that we talked about that, remember, I'm just going to go back to the first couple of slides. Remember this aging population? They've got equity. They've gone up the housing ladder. They're trying to cash out. Guess what kind of homes they're going for? The same ones the first-time buyers are going for. Right? So what's happening in Spokane is you get this cap rate compression. So you get someone that's lived in Green Lake, and they're selling their house for $1.2 million, something like that. They go to Spokane and buy a nice place. They can buy a fourplex. They can buy a fourplex, they can buy a small multifamily unit to supplement their income and maybe still have some cash left over. They're not building first-time buyer houses there either. They're not building first-time buyer houses really anywhere. So given that's the case, they can cash out, they can get the rental income, and they can live a great life. Well, where's the problem with that? If I'm a first-time buyer, and I can only come up with 10 or 15% as a down payment, how am I going to outgun some guy that's got pure equity to pay in cash for their place to live? They're paying cash. So what you're seeing is a fundamental disconnect between the ability of people to pay in their incomes and the price of housing. That the price of housing is moving toward the amount of equity that people have to be able to throw into it and how much they want to invest. That's a huge problem. It's a huge policy problem, but those capital market expectations mean that it makes it really difficult for anything other than a multifamily rental deal to pencil out. So even with condominium liability reform, even with the changes they've made to try to build more first-time buyer housing, making the deal pencil out is probably not going to happen. They're willing to take huge yield. I mean, those spread in yield. The Spokane one, for instance, 7% for stuff that needs refurbishment, and 5.5% for prime. You've got a 1.5% spread in your cap rates. That means they don't see any risk at all in real property. Nothing at all. And those cap rates are declining fast. Okay? Let's match this with consumer expectations. I'm a consumer. I'm expecting that if I'm a teacher, you've got someone who's a teacher and a nurse or something like that, or a policeman or fireman, that they're going to be able to buy a house. My expectation is after a few years of renting, I'm going to save up a down payment and buy a house. Well, if they're getting outgunned by everybody else who has equity and is paying cash for it, and then buying a second or third house with that cash to throw into the rental market, that supply of houses for them to be able to buy is gone. Right? It's just gone. So you have to ask yourself, is density, and this is what a lot of people say, density is the answer. Build higher density and it's the complete answer. Okay, I will believe that density is the answer when I see 100-unit condominium development out here in the middle of Shelby. The 1 or 2 building condominiums. When I see that 100-unit development going out here this next year for first-time buyers, and the deal pencils out, which it probably won't, right? For first-time buyers, I will believe that density is the only answer. Because I don't see that working. I don't see that working. I don't see that deal penciling out ever. Whereas multifamily with tax exemptions, with all sorts of assistance and everything else, that could work out. But it's all rental housing. People aren't moving up the ladder. So density is not the answer to meet people's expectations, because that density is going to be found in the rental market. It's not going to be found in condominiums. Or at least not in areas outside of Seattle. So young renters that want to own, they got to go. I don't know how many people I've talked to that they're in Seattle and they say, well, we can't afford to buy here, we're going to move to Spokane. And then they go to Spokane, they can't afford to buy there either now. It's changed that quickly. And if we look at the 22% rise in prices here over the last 2 years, and the change in affordability, it's increasingly becoming the case here. All right, let's look at financial equity. We've talked about this in some ways. The important thing here, and I've talked about the financial equity and the whole problem in the housing ladder of ownership. What you've got is renters don't get equity. The longer they stay renters, and they keep chasing that sort of dream of buying a house, they may be able to save more, but unless they can start saving a lot more quickly, given the current market dynamics, it becomes an elusive dream. They're going to go somewhere to find it, which is why people are moving to Mason County. The first time buyer, all those people see Mason County, they'll refurbish that house. They'll build something new, they'll build a trailer on it. They'll do something for a while, right? But the thing is, rental assistance programs and all this sort of thing doesn't really help the problem. Rents go up. You don't have the security of tenure. Remember, the rental market has its own dynamics, and it's filling that vacuum. And as rents keep going up, it becomes harder to save for that home. So that's an important thing to remember here, right? So it's not an income problem, it's an equity problem. But more to the point, that equity problem comes down to taxes. And people say, why would I want to move from California to Arizona or somewhere else like that? The big one is the changes that were made to the tax code in 2018, right? California is lovely, I like California. When you've got a state income tax of 9%, right, and you're capped in terms of what can happen on deductibility, $10,000. You cannot deduct more than $10,000 in state and local taxes. Now think about it. You're paying real estate tax. If you stayed in your house because of Proposition 13 in California, if you've been there 30 years, you're paying really low tax. You try and trade down, and guess what? It's based upon your transaction price. So if I've got a $1.5 million house in California, and I'm going to trade down, all of a sudden my property taxes are going to go up. And I'm paying for a smaller place. And I've got a 9% income tax. As opposed to, I could move up here to I could move on the Hood Canal. I could move up here to Belfair or someplace like that. Really nice. I'm close enough to Seattle. I'm close enough to services. I'm close enough to a lot of these services. I have no state income tax. I could buy a really nice place and still have less than $10,000 a year in property taxes. And then I could take that extra money and I could buy those first-time buyer houses and rent them out to people who can't afford to buy the houses now. That's pretty frightening, right? And that's increasingly the story that's happening all over the state. It's happening in Spokane, it's happening in the Tri-Cities, it's happening there. And it's coming here fast. Given the slope of that line over the past 2 years, that's what you've got. So, back to a point Michael made, there's a survey that was done that 40% of existing homeowners in California, 40% of them plan on leaving the state once they sell. 40% are going to leave. Nevada and Arizona being the two places they want to go, Washington being third. There's a big divide within the state on that. Most of the people that are moving up to Washington are from Northern California. Most people in Southern California are moving to the desert. I guess it's a weather thing, I don't know, right? But that's really a key here in the Olympic Peninsula in particular. In particular, that's a huge trend. Once again, coming to a channel near you soon. So let's look at sort of regulation now. Right? This is the kind of third rail here in terms of regulation and how that plans out. And this is where I get into trouble. The rest of it I can kind of justify. The regulation that can get me into real big trouble, right? There's a lot of things that are changing. The housing landscape is changing. You have lots of people in Olympia and the city councils in the big cities and everything else saying, we're going to change how the housing market works. Right? We're going to change how it works for renters. We're going to change how it works for developers. And we're going to charge huge impact fees. And we're going to charge huge levies. And we're going to keep cities and towns from growing or whatever because they want it to be what it is. But a word of caution on all this. It's not necessarily the regulation itself that matters. The regulation itself can be bad regulation or good regulation. But the key is, for a developer, time is money. And they want certainty. They want to know that if they buy a piece of ground and they want to put something on it, that they're going to be allowed to do it, and they're going to be allowed to do it within a time frame that they know of, that they know that that time frame is not going to change. They want certainty, right? It doesn't matter how many regulations you add or take away. If you add and take away a whole bunch all the time and change what happens, the developer goes, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait and see what pans out. That's not a good thing when the problem you have high demand. Remember those demographic charts. Those old people that do manage to trade, they're not moving anywhere. So you've got to build first-time buyer houses because the ones that aren't first-time buyer houses aren't going to change. The ones that have equity are going to outgun them. You've got a supply problem. So do you need to add more uncertainty to the process? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense to me at all. So it's a matter of certainty of the process, that people know that there's a process that's predictable. That comes down to the Growth Management Act. It comes down to buildable lands. It comes down to a whole huge range of issues, right? Is the predictability within the system is what matters, because then they can price it, okay? Because that uncertainty costs money. They're going to price that, they're going to say, well, if it's uncertain, I'm going to expect a higher price before I start to build. I'm going to wait till I know I can get that higher price that I need. I'm going to get that return that I want, right? So nobody's going to build condominium deals because I've got to get the timing right then. Right now, I've got to hit the market just right. If I'm building multifamily, I've got rents. I can lower the rents, but I can still make my cash flow. It's more certain for them, right? So let's add regulatory uncertainty to that, and I may have to wait another year. Or I may have to wait another 6 months for my approvals. That means the guy who's going to build the condominiums is going, whew, I hope the market's still good in 6 months. I hope that's good. But a guy building apartments is going to sit there and say, okay, well, I may lose a little money, I can lower the rents, but I can at least keep cash coming in. I can at least stay alive until the cycle changes, right? So it's that certainty that matters, that prices out the risk and return and helps determine what the development's going to look like, right? So, in terms of thinking about that issue and thinking about the economics of it, is that I'm a supply side guy. Demand's going to be high, the population says we're going to be good, low interest rates, you've got jobs everywhere, you've got all the rest of this stuff going on. So, think about this as the real problem here. Imagine what it would take to build the city of Shelton or any other city you choose from scratch. How long would it take to rebuild that entire city? It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be that fast. Think about it. You've got a 63% increase in the elderly population, right? Or in the retiree population. You've got increases in all the other cohorts of 22% happening in the next 20 years. Could I rebuild the entire city of Shelton in 20 years? Probably not. Probably not. But given the demographics and everything, do I need to start building at that level? Maybe, but perhaps not so bad. But think about the time it takes. If I had to rebuild a whole city, right, what would be my biggest impediments? What would be the things that would stop me from doing that? Is it money? Is it job? Well, it's easy to finance things right now. It's easy to get the money. What's going to stop me? So just remember, land, labor, materials, and regulation, right? Everybody says the 3 L's, land, labor, lumber not so much anymore, because houses are built out of lots of stuff now. But I would add regulation to that, because it's going to increase or change the timing, right? What housing do people want to buy? You could build high-density housing anywhere. Does that mean people want to buy it? If I move to a place like Shelton, what are my expectations on what kind of house I'm going to have? Do I want to live in the same type of ownership unit that I would have on Capitol Hill in Seattle? Not necessarily. I'm moving down here for a reason, and it's not so I can live in equally high density, right? So it's those expectations. But remember, when you think about that problem in terms of how long it takes to build an entire city from scratch in that time, if it's cost effective to build, right, and is demand ever going to be met if it comes in as quickly as it has? My answer to that is no. That's depressing. I'm an economist. That's what I do, okay? But what I can say is make things predictable and make sure that you can say, if I had to rebuild the city of Shelton, it would take however long it would take. So with that thought kind of leaving you thinking about things, I will leave you there. I've taken up way too much time. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
All right, I know this third leg of our presentation is always quite interesting. It really dives into local housing of what's going on in Mason County. So I'd like to introduce Andy Conklin from Whittier Kinley. He's going to go ahead and talk about our local stats going on in Mason County.
Hi there. Is this okay? Good? Yeah? It's always fun being here for this. I really enjoy what the work that we get done with these guys, they really bring some cool insight that to really take a broader look at what we've got going on. So, got a couple of parts. The basic breakdown of statistics of what has happened within the last year, essentially, in Mason County, and then what we're doing to help that along, and just basically where we're headed. So, when you look at the housing market as a whole, some of these slides are just updated versions of what we've done in the past. So this is the number of active listings that were available in September of these various years. In 2017, that number was 388 active listings available. In 2018, that was 335. This year, there's 265 listings available. That's a pretty dramatic decrease, right? The number of sales closed in that same time, in those same time periods, September of 2017, 141. Last year there was 103, and in 2019 there's 149 in September. So this is where we start talking about the month supply of inventory and how that relates to the market in general. Assuming that there are 265 active listings, these are residential listings, right? This doesn't take into account any commercial stuff or vacant land or homes in like manufactured home parks or something along that line. So I don't believe condos are in there, but as we just learned, they're not that big of a part of our life. So month supply of inventory, when you have 265 as we do, or let's start at the top here. We have 388 listings in 2017, and in 2017 in September, 141 of those sold. That means it's going to take 2.8 months at that sales rate to consume what's available in the marketplace. 2.8 months. The general consensus is if you have 6 months worth of supply, it's a balanced market. Okay? If you are over 6 months supply, buyer side of the equation. If you're under 6 months supply, seller side of the equation. Okay? In 2018, that number was at 3.3 months. So it actually increased last year. This year, 1.8. Right? So if nothing else hit the market today, we wouldn't have anything to sell in just under 2 months. Okay? Now, that is somewhat alarming, but then I say, you know what? There's a lot of us selling a lot of things. Right? And so I was interested to know what the number of new listings taken. This is a new piece of information for me this year. Number of new listings taken in the first 3 quarters. Everything that I am is through the end of the 3rd quarter. Number of new listings taken in the first 3 quarters in Mason County. In 2017, there were 1,475 new residential listings taken. 2018, that number is 1,380. And this year's 1,322. So there's still a lot of houses coming on the market. They're just selling. Right? And so the old days of you calling me and saying, hey, let's go look at 6 houses this weekend, doesn't happen, right? It's just, there's just not the inventory out there to talk about. So this is where James got in my pocket a little bit here earlier. So this is the number of properties that have sold by price range in Mason County. Okay, under $100,000. In September of 18, we had 59. Through September of 19, there was 54. Between 100 and 200,000, that number went from 297 to 196. Quite a drop. In 200,000 to 250,000, also dropped from 225 to 203. Everything else, the higher end, there was an increase in the number of sales. So if we're 250 to 300, we had 3 more this year than we did last year. 300 to 400, we had 34 more properties sell than we did this year than last year. And obviously you can see how we're doing there. Total number of sales in all those price ranges were up 10 units over this time last year. Okay? The interesting thing about those things is I start looking at month supply within those little price range. brackets, right? Because it's like, well, what's moving, what's not? Where should I focus my energy? Should I be selling it lower end stuff or higher end stuff, or where is it going to be most cost effective for me to spend my time? Everything's pretty low on the supply category, right? Everything's pretty low with the exception of 500,000 plus, and there's 7.3 months worth of inventory available in that marketplace right now, or end of September. The median close price, and this is a breakdown by our multiple listing service areas. So areas 171, 172, 173. So I'm just going to go in order here. Area 171, the Belfair, Tahuya area, had a median close sale price through the third quarter increased by 20% over last year. Lake Limerick, Mason Lake, Emerald Lake area 172, that was an increase in median at 19%. Union, South Shore, we had an increase of 22% from 266,750 to 324,500. Harston Island. Harston Island was relatively flat. Harston Island went from 269 to 282 for a 5% increase. City of Shelton, this is more the UGA, it's our area 175, had a really big increase from 200,000 to 243 as a median. A large part has to do with the housing development across from the high school where there were 40 some odd units that sold for $250,000. Just a bunch of them sold like that. Out in the Aggie area, 5% increase. Southwest Mason County, area 177, that was a 17% increase from 254,950 last year to 297,500 this year. Area 178, Hoodsport, Potlatch, Lake Cushman, from 179,500 last year to 190 for a 6% increase. Area 179, Lynch Road, Arcadia Road, that loop had a 9% increase. And the Allen and Grapeview area 180 increased by 3%. So that's pretty flat also. Overall, this is through the end. This is Northwest multiple listings statistics only through the end of third quarter. So when you see my median at 264, and we were talking about 279 earlier, that's taking into account all the sales. And so this is Northwest multiple listing service through third quarter. 240,000 last year, $24,000 increase to 264 this year, which is overall median increase of 10%. Okay. Upward trend. New residential building permits. This is single family, duplex, and additional dwellings. Okay, ADUs. In Mason County as a whole, minus the city of Shelton, in 2018 there were 182 new building permits issued. In 2019 that number is 244. Okay. Inside the city of Shelton, in 2018 there were 35, and in 2019 31. That's an oddity in a market with demand. Building permits are going down. Biggest challenges, James talked to us about this earlier, inventory, right? And the ability to create inventory. And that's really where, we have to find a way to work our way through this. We have, there's a number of landowners out there, there's a number of developers with parcels that are ready to go. Just sitting there waiting, ready to go. Just sitting there waiting. One of my clients has a nice parcel and got to his engineer and just had a off-the-cuff estimate as to what it was going to cost to do all of the preliminary work and actually do the construction and build the roads and the sidewalks and the infrastructure and all that. And it was about a 200 lot subdivision, and it was going to be roughly $50,000 a lot to build it. And the last number of lots that sold in any bulk like that sold around 40. And so that's a challenge. And that's a challenge that we all have to figure out how to work with. Are we going to wait for the market to appreciate, or are we going to find ways to help burden or help spread the burden of those costs out somewhere? That's an answer that, I mean, if somebody has that answer right now, stand up, please, please stand up, because that's a really complex topic, but it's our reality. It's our reality. Affordability. We talked about affordability real quickly with this housing affordability index. I'm going to get into that a little bit more. I'm going to take a page out of his book, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. And uncertainty. Where are we headed? We don't know. We struggle in Mason County with a bunch of land that's undevelopable for a number of reasons. Timberland, critical areas, all these number of issues that we deal with. One of the reasons we like it so well is because of all of the reasons it makes it challenging to develop, right? And so, but with our growth management and with all of those things and our need to condense the density inside of urban growth boundaries, we have a challenge of available property outside that we can't service. We just can't service it. And so the inability to develop outside is I'm going to editorialize for a minute. It's holding us back. This is a difficult map to read until you can see it. It's essentially the household income by population, the census tracts inside of Mason County. You kind of see the Mason County border take shape. The numbers are really hard to find. Read there. The darker the red, the lower the income. The darker the blue, the higher the income. Western Mason County is well below the median income in Mason County. North and southeastern Mason County is above the median. City of Shelton is below, and that's where we stand. The median income in Mason County, median household income in Mason County, and this is a 2017 number, is $53,087 median. So I'm going to reiterate a little bit of what he's got. The affordability index takes into account how well the median income can support the median sale price in the area. Okay. Again, my numbers were a little bit different because of the data I pulled it from. I pulled it from the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. But how well does the median income support the median sale price? And it assumes a 20% down payment, and that the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance (PITI) payment will equal 30% of your income. So $53,087 is $4,424 a month. 30% of that is your available for house expense at $1,327 PITI, which means that the price that you can afford is $270,000. Which means the housing, based on this information here, the housing affordability index in Mason County is right at 102. 100 is perfect balance. The house, the income perfectly supports it. Obviously, if it's below it, like you told us before, if it's below it, it's less affordable. Above it, it's more affordable. So we talked real quickly about workforce housing, and that's a little. There's a group of people in town that's being spearheaded by Jim Burrell at Peninsula Credit Union. It's a workforce housing coalition, and I've been fortunate enough to sit on that on those meetings. Workforce housing is defined as everything that is within 60% of the median income to 140% of the median income. Okay, so if you have a $53,000 median, 60% of that median is $31,000 and change. Okay? Calculate that all out. I did take a little bit of liberty here. I've kind of gone between the University of Washington study and the workforce study, and I've kind of created my own little world with this number. And this is the workforce study still assumes a 20% down payment at the lower end, but it also assumes 85% of the median sale price. So I use the workforce number at 60%, and I use the University of Washington first-time homebuyer qualification with a 10% down payment instead of a 20% down payment. Does that make sense? Did to me. Okay. And so that means that lower-end house they can afford to pay $150,000 for a house. There aren't many of those available to us.
The ones that aren't are way below 9.
Right. So the median income at 53, they can afford 270. 140% of the median is $74,322, and they can afford a $375,000 house. So basically, the range that we need to be building, the missing middle that we're talking about, the range that we need to be building is between 175,000, or excuse me, 150,000 and 375. That's a big, broad range. So now, as you look earlier on the number of units that we're selling in those particular ranges, the higher the price, the lower the demand. So big balancing act. So this is it's comparison time a little bit. We need to look at how we compare to or what we look like when somebody's looking to shop for a house in Shelton, Washington. You know, it's either Zillow or Redfin, right? One of those two. And this is the Zillow page. This is one of Keith's listings that he sold within the last year up in on Bay Ridge, which is in the Grandview Heights development, one of the most recent developments that we have in town. That house on the left is 1,883 square feet. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's on a 6,000 square foot lot with a 2-car garage, and it sold at $295. This house in Olympia that I'm using as a comparison is near Olympia High School, in a relatively newer development over there, and arguably one of their better neighborhoods, newer neighborhoods. It's 1,908 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. It's on a little over 5,000 square foot lot with a 2-car garage, sold for $372,000. Okay? That means that our price is 79% of the Olympia price. Last year, that number was 78%. This year, it's 79%. So that's a really small closing of the gap to our neighbor, but it's not. We're not increasing at a real rapid rate, which I think is not as bad as I used to think it was. Because if you start closing that gap, as you close that gap, people are going to be less willing to drive to our neighborhood to be buying houses here. And so, I shouldn't think while I'm standing here. So what are we doing about this, right? We've done a lot. In Shelton in the last 12 months, we've had some really significant changes around, right? The city has done a number of things with the Downtown Connector project, right? I mean, the roads, I love a roundabout or hate it. It's pretty darn efficient. and these guys they have spent with not only that, but the basin projects to improve sewer systems and all of the things that they've done a really terrific job of trying to get us moving in the right direction. The Shelton School District, boy, it was hard to not see what the Shelton School District was doing construction-wise and things in the last year. $65 million plus school bond that was passed and it was built. There's new buildings at the high school. There's an entirely new Mountain View Elementary School. All of the school buildings are getting maintenance of one level or another. Bordeaux's getting $1 million gym. I mean, there's a lot of money being spent there. I don't have it on here, but what the hospital's doing with their $20 million building and their project, there's a ton of money there. And then, there's pictures of the local schools and the staff standing out front, same thing. And then the YMCA. A year ago on October 18th, we had a kickoff ceremony downtown Shelton saying, we're bringing the YMCA to town, and we got to raise a lot of money. And we really didn't have any idea how we were going to be able to do it. But we were committed, and we needed to get it done. And this, you may or may not have been able to see this rendering at this point, but this is what it's going to look like. This is what phase 1 of the YMCA looks like. There's an outdoor pool that is going to be covered in the wintertime. They've got the ability to cover the pool in the wintertime. Phase 1 has a half-court basketball gym. There's a bunch of community space. There's workout space. There's locker rooms. There's exercise places. The really cool thing is the community partnerships that have come with the YMCA. The hospital is going to have some space in there to be doing physical therapy, those sorts of things. Pack Mountain Workforce is a coalition of counties, small counties in the Pacific Mountain region that is going to be providing workforce training, so we can get some people who may not be on the employment list or not have hope for a job, be able to train them so that they can get to that point. Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Big Brothers and Big Sisters is a huge thing. I've been really heavily involved at the school district the last year, and Lori's story about the young lady that doesn't have anything, there's 800 of them. There's 800 of them. It's a big, big deal. You know, I'm going to coach a football game tonight, and one of our kids sleeps in a tent. It's reality. So Big Brothers and Big Sisters through the YMCA is an incredible opportunity for everybody in here to get involved and help these guys just be somebody that listens to them. A lot of them don't have that. So I'm super stoked about Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Peninsula Credit Union is going to have some space in there. They're going to be working on financial health training, teaching people how to deal with money. Right? That's an amazing piece of the puzzle. And none of it could have happened without the partnership from the City of Shelton. The City of Shelton leased the YMCA the land, very, very affordable. And there's been a number of projects we just got through with the hearings examiner and the staff, and everybody has been pro YMCA from the get-go. It's really, really an awesome thing. In the last 12 months, locally, we've raised $7 million. That's cool. That's from Green Diamond Resource Company with a donation of $1 million. That's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with $500,000. That's Steve Ballmer Foundation with $500,000. That is Jeff and Tricia Rakes. Jeff and Tricia Rakes own the company that owns the Alderbrook. There's $500,000 from that foundation. There is lots of big donors that are stepping up and saying this has to happen here. And so with all of the community support that's happened, we've also been able to leverage that support and get some additional funding from some public resources, over $4 million in that money. Some from the state, some from the feds. So in about a year total, we raised a little over $13 million, and that is cool. So what are we doing? We're going to work, right? I mean, we're going to work. We're building schools, we're building roads, we're building infrastructure, we're building YMCAs, and we all know that we're not real thrilled with where we are, that we need to make it a little bit better. So that's what we're doing. That's all I have. Like has been said before, the groundbreaking ceremony for the YMCA. If you don't know where that is, it's right up by the high school, in between the high school and the junior high. And that is Tuesday, November 5th at 11 a.m. We want to have a big party, and we want to celebrate. So that's all I've got.
Did anybody have any questions for Andy? Sneak off. No question. We'll get wow. Can you guys hear me? I have a big voice anyways. All right, we're just going to finish up here, a few more minutes, and we'll be done. Let's see here. We talked about that. I'd like to present a gift to each of our speakers. There you go, Andy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming today. All right, so since this is our regular membership meeting, do we have anything for the good of the order from our membership? Okay. So the next big thing for Mesa County Association is we have our installation dinner party December 6th at Alderbrook Golf Club at 5:30. We will be installing Keith Fuller as our incoming president. I get to say, see ya. Love ya. Yeah. Anybody else? All right.
Classes,
What was that?
the two classes that are coming up tonight,
I don't see.
it's on down at the bottom of the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have this agenda. Sorry, guys. Okay. So Northwest MLS, there are some classes, some statistics, and transaction desk. So please, if you need some clock hours, they're right here in Shelton. Make sure you take advantage of them. All right. I say we are adjourned. Thank you for coming.